A 6-year-old girl is standing in front of a billionaire. She's speaking perfect Arabic. But she's not a diplomat's daughter. She's not from a wealthy family. She's the janitor's kid. And in the next 60 seconds, she's about to expose a secret that will save a $3 billion company in Manhattan and destroy the man hiding behind a mop bucket in Chicago. What you're about to hear is the story of how the greatest chess player America ever produced threw away his career, his fortune, and his future for 3 more years with the woman he loved. This is about a choice most people will never have to make. This is about what happens when genius meets desperation. And this is about the moment when a little girl playing one perfect chess game forced the entire world to answer one question. What would you sacrifice for love? If you're here because you believe courage still defeats power, that love still wins, and that sometimes the smallest person in the room changes everything, then you need to hear this story all the way through. Because I promise you, the ending will wreck you in the best possible way. Let's start where it all fell apart. Boston, Massachusetts. 26 years ago. Dorian Cross was 15 years old when he became the youngest international chess master in American history. They called him the Sentinel because he could see 15 moves ahead while everyone else was still figuring out move 1. He wasn't just playing chess, he was predicting the future. Boston, Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles. Every major tournament, Dorian dominated. Universities were throwing full scholarships at him. MIT wanted him. Stanford wanted him. Sponsors were lining up with million-dollar endorsement deals. The trajectory was clear. Dorian Cross was going to be the next world chess champion. He was going to be a legend. He was going to have fame, wealth, and glory. And then, at a poetry reading in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he met a girl named Anya. She wasn't impressed by his trophies. She wasn't dazzled by his genius. She just saw him, the quiet, sensitive, kind man underneath all the accolades. She wrote him a poem about patterns, about how the most beautiful things in life can't be calculated or predicted. Dorian fell completely, impossibly in love. He proposed to her in Central Park, New York, under the Bow Bridge, with nothing but a handwritten poem and a promise. No ring. No plan. Just love. They got married in a tiny courthouse in Brooklyn. Anya wore a simple white dress. Dorian wore his only suit. They had $17 between them and a future that felt infinite. For 2 years, they were perfectly, desperately happy. And then the diagnosis came. Acute myeloid leukemia. Aggressive. Fast-moving. The kind of cancer that doesn't negotiate. The doctor sat them down in a cold hospital room in Boston and gave them the numbers. Without treatment, Anya had maybe 6 months. With standard treatment, maybe a year. But there was an experimental trial. Cutting edge. Happening at a research facility in Houston, Texas. It wasn't a guarantee, it was a chance. A small one. Maybe 30%. The cost? $50,000. Up front. Immediately. Dorian tried everything. He called his sponsors. He begged his university connections. He applied for loans, grants, medical assistance programs. But chess fame doesn't translate to real-world money when you're 22 years old with no credit history and no collateral. The banks in Boston said no. The sponsors said no. Even the Chess Federation said there was nothing they could do. Dorian was watching the love of his life fade away, and he was completely powerless. He had one asset left, his upcoming championship match in Las Vegas. Winner takes $100,000. But Dorian was the favorite, heavily favored, which meant the betting odds were enormous. And that's when Dorian Cross made the choice that would define the rest of his life. In a shadowy hotel room off the Las Vegas Strip, Dorian met with a man named Vincent Calabrese. A fixer. A gambling operator. The kind of man who made his money on things that happened in dark corners. The deal was simple. Dorian would deliberately lose the championship match. Make it look close, but lose. In exchange, Vincent would give him $50,000 in cash. Immediately. Dorian asked for one guarantee. If I do this, you give me the money before the match. I need to get her into treatment now. Vincent smiled. You throw the match, I get paid, you get paid. Everybody wins. Except Dorian wasn't winning. He was trading his entire future for 3 more years. He took the deal. He got the $50,000. He put Anya on a plane to Houston. The experimental treatment started immediately. And then Dorian Kross walked onto the stage in Las Vegas and committed professional suicide. The match was broadcast live across America. Chess enthusiasts from New York to San Francisco were watching the Sentinel claim his throne. And then in move 37, Dorian made a blunder so obvious, so catastrophic, that even amateur players watching at home knew something was wrong. He sacrificed his queen for nothing. He left his king exposed. He played like a man who wanted to lose. And he did lose. The chess world exploded. The forums lit up. The commentators were stunned. What just happened? Did Dorian Kross just throw the match? Within 48 hours, the investigation started. Within a week, the evidence was undeniable. Vincent Calabrese, under pressure, gave up Dorian's name. Dorian Kross was stripped of his titles. Banned for life from competitive chess. His name became synonymous with betrayal, with disgrace, with cheating. Sponsors dropped him. Universities revoked their offers. His mentor, Grandmaster Richard Bellamy, refused to ever speak to him again. The chess world turned their backs on the Sentinel. But Dorian used that $50,000 to buy 3 more years with Anya. 3 years of sunrises in Cape Cod. 3 years of laughter in their tiny apartment in Brooklyn. 3 years that allowed their daughter, Zia, to be born in Mount Sinai Hospital, New York City. 3 years of hearing Anya whisper, "I love you," one more time before she finally, peacefully, passed away in Dorian's arms. He chose love over glory. He chose his wife's life over his own legacy. And when Anya died, Dorian was left alone with a 3-year-old daughter, a ruined reputation, and a future that felt like a prison sentence. So he disappeared. Before we continue, I need to tell you something. This story gets so much more intense. We're talking about a 6-year-old genius, a $3 billion corporate crisis, and a billionaire's test that will leave you absolutely speechless. But here's the thing. Stories like this, stories that remind you why courage matters and why love always wins, these don't go viral by accident. If this story is hitting you, if you want to see where this goes, do me one favor. Just tap that subscribe button right now. Because I promise you, the next 30 minutes will restore your faith in humanity. Let's talk about what happened when Dorian tried to disappear. Dorian Kross moved to Chicago with 3-year-old Zia and $140 in his pocket. He couldn't use his real credentials. He couldn't apply for strategy jobs, tech jobs, anything that would require a background check. Because the moment anyone Googled Dorian Kross, they'd find the scandal. They'd find the shame. So he became invisible. He got a job as a night janitor at a corporate office building in downtown Chicago. AegisCore Technologies, a cybersecurity company that was bleeding money but still had enough cash to keep the lights on. Dorian worked the midnight to 8 shift. He mopped floors. He emptied trash cans. He cleaned conference rooms where executives made decisions worth millions of dollars. And every morning when his shift ended, he'd pick up Zia from the overnight childcare program in the building and take her home to their tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, Chicago. Zia didn't know her father was a disgraced grandmaster. She just knew Daddy was tired a lot. And that Daddy loved to teach her things. Languages. Patterns. Strategy. And of course, chess. Dorian taught Zia everything he knew. Not because he wanted her to be a champion, but because he wanted her to see the world the way he did. As a puzzle. As a series of patterns waiting to be solved. By the time Zia was 6 years old, she spoke 4 languages fluently: English, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. She could calculate complex math in her head. She could read people's emotions like a book. And she could play chess at a level that would terrify most adult players. But Dorian kept her hidden. He was terrified that if anyone discovered how brilliant she was, they'd start asking questions. They'd find out who he really was. And the shame would bury them both. So he stayed in the shadows, pushing his mob, hiding his genius, protecting his daughter, until the night Vivienne Shaw's world started to collapse. Vivienne Shaw built AegisCore Technologies from nothing. She started in a garage in Palo Alto, California, 25 years ago. Just her, a laptop, and a vision to create software that could protect people, real people, vulnerable people, from the worst parts of the internet. AegisCore's code protected children from predators. It stopped human trafficking networks. It shut down illegal arms dealers. It saved lives. But code doesn't pay the bills. And Vivienne, brilliant as she was, had made one catastrophic mistake. She trusted the wrong partner. Caleb Vance, her co-founder, a man who cared more about profit margins than protecting people. When AegisCore's growth slowed, Caleb had pushed Vivienne to pivot, to sell their technology to the highest bidder, ethics be damned. Vivienne refused. So Caleb left. And when he left, he took half the company's investor relationships with him. Within 2 years, AegisCore was drowning in $3 billion of debt. Vendors were suing. Investors were pulling out. The company that had saved thousands of lives was about to be gutted and sold for parts. Vivienne had one last option: Khalid Al-Zahrani, a Saudi-American billionaire investor based in New York City. The kind of man who could write a check for $3 billion without blinking. But Khalid didn't invest in companies. He invested in people. He wanted to see character, courage, integrity. And he had a reputation for testing people in the most brutal ways possible. Vivienne flew from San Francisco to New York for the meeting of her life. She prepared for weeks. She rehearsed her pitch 1,000 times. She learned basic Arabic greetings to show respect. But she had no idea what was about to happen. 2 weeks before the meeting with Khalid, Vivienne was in her Chicago office at 2 a.m., staring at her computer screen, sobbing. AegisCore's flagship product, the one thing that could convince Khalid to invest, had a critical bug. A recursive loop buried deep in the code. The kind of error that would take a team of elite programmers weeks to find and fix. And Vivienne had 72 hours. She was alone in the office kitchen, crying into her coffee, when Dorian walked in with his cleaning cart. He saw her. Saw the desperation. Saw the code on her laptop screen. And he saw the error immediately. Dorian didn't say anything at first. He just took a napkin, pulled out a pen, and drew a simple diagram. The loop. A pattern. The exact place where the logic was breaking down. There, he said quietly, pointing. Your recursion is calling itself before the base case resolves. You need to invert the conditional on line 847. Vivienne stared at him. At the janitor, who had just solved in 30 seconds what her entire engineering team couldn't figure out in 3 days. Who are you? She whispered. Dorian just smiled sadly. I'm nobody, Miss Shaw. Just someone who sees patterns. He walked away before she could ask anything else. But Vivienne didn't forget. She fixed the code using his diagram. The product launched perfectly. And when she flew to New York to meet Khalid Al-Zahrani, she had no idea that the quiet janitor who saved her code was about to save her entire company. Okay, I know you're hooked. But here's what I need you to understand. We're about to get to the moment that changes everything. The moment that will make you want to text this story to every single person you know. If you haven't liked this video yet, hit that like button right now. Because what happens next? The chess match, the billionaire's test, the impossible reversal, this is the stuff that stories are made of. Let's go to New York City. Let's go to the conference room where Vivienne Shaw's dream is about to die. The meeting was held in Khalid Al-Zahrani's private conference room on the 58th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Mahogany table. Leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. Vivienne sat across from Khalid, her heart pounding. She had her pitch memorized. She had her financials ready. She had practiced her Arabic greetings 1,000 times. Khalid didn't even look at her materials. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. Not a warm smile. A testing smile. And then he started speaking in rapid, complex Arabic. The Cairo dialect. Dismissive. Deliberately designed to humiliate. In Arabic he said, "Tell me, Miss Shaw, how can I trust you to navigate the complex, hidden dangers of the digital world when you cannot even navigate the simple complexities of language? What is the true purpose of your company? Tell me in your own words, if you even understand the question." Vivienne's mind went blank. She understood maybe 3 words. She tried to respond in her rehearsed Arabic, but it came out broken, stammering, wrong. Khalid's smile widened. He was enjoying this. This was the test. Could she handle pressure? Could she adapt when the rules changed? Vivienne felt her 25 years of work slipping away. She felt the humiliation burning in her chest. She was about to lose everything because of a language barrier. In the back of the room, nearly invisible in the shadows, stood Dorian Cross, the night janitor, pushing his cleaning cart, watching the scene unfold with quiet, horrified recognition. He knew this humiliation. He had lived it. And standing next to him, holding his hand, was 6-year-old Zia. She wasn't supposed to be there. Childcare had fallen through. Dorian had no choice but to bring her to work. She'd been sitting quietly in the corner, reading a book. But now she was watching Vivienne. Watching the powerful woman who had always been kind to her crumble under the weight of someone else's cruelty. And Zia didn't like it. Khalid was about to deliver his final verdict. About to tell Vivienne that her company was worthless, that her vision was naive, that she wasn't strong enough to survive in his world. And then a small, clear voice cut through the silence. Speaking perfect, flawless Arabic. Cairo dialect. "Excuse me, sir. There is no need for translation. I will speak with you. And I will tell Miss Vivienne the true purpose of her company." Every head in the room turned. Zia Kross stepped out of the shadows. 6 years old. Wearing a simple blue dress. Her father's eyes wide with panic behind her. Khalid stared at her. At this impossible child. Speaking his language with perfect grammar, perfect pronunciation. He responded in Arabic, his voice now stripped of arrogance, replaced with genuine shock. "What is your name, little one? Who taught you to speak like this?" Zia smiled. "My name is Zia. Everyone teaches me, sir. Languages are just doors. The more doors you open, the more rooms you can enter. And right now, Miss Vivienne needs someone to open a door for her." Then she switched to English, looking directly at Vivienne. "Don't worry, Miss Vivienne. He's testing you. But not the way you think. He doesn't care about your numbers. He cares if you have the courage to fight for what you built. He wants to see if you'll give up when things get hard." Vivienne stared at this child. This brilliant, impossible child. Khalid leaned forward, fascinated. "And how do you know this, Zia?" Zia's smile was pure confidence. "Because my daddy taught me that the real game is never about what people say. It's about what they're trying to learn about you. And you're trying to learn if Miss Vivienne will quit." Khalid laughed. A genuine, delighted laugh. "Your father is a wise man. What does he do?" Zia glanced back at Dorian, who was frozen in the doorway, terrified. "He's a janitor," Zia said simply. "But he's the smartest person I know." Khalid's eyes shifted to Dorian. Studied him. Saw something in the way the man stood, the way he held himself. "Come here, janitor," Khalid said. Not unkindly, but firmly. Dorian had no choice. He stepped forward, his heart hammering. Khalid gestured to the chessboard sitting on the conference table. A beautiful marble set. "Your daughter is remarkable. But I want to see if her wisdom comes from good teaching or natural genius. So, play with her. Let me watch." Dorian's worst nightmare was unfolding. But Zia was already sitting down, arranging the pieces. She looked up at her father with complete trust. It's okay, Daddy. Let's show him. And Dorian, with no other choice, sat down to play chess with his daughter in front of the one man who could either save or destroy everything. Khalid didn't play. He watched. Zia moved first. But she opened with the ready opening, an unorthodox, aggressive strategy that only the most confident players attempt. Dorian countered carefully, defensively. He was trying to hide his skill, trying to play like an amateur. But Zia wasn't having it. Daddy, you're playing scared, she said in English, loud enough for everyone to hear. You taught me that scared players always lose. Play for real. Khalid's eyes narrowed. This was interesting. Dorian swallowed hard. And then, slowly, he started playing the way he used to. The way the Sentinel played. He saw 7 moves ahead. Then 10. Then 15. Zia matched him move for move. The room was silent except for the soft click of marble pieces on the board. Vivienne watched, mesmerized. She didn't understand chess, but she understood genius. And she was watching 2 geniuses communicate in a language deeper than words. Khalid watched too. And he saw something that made him lean forward, his entire demeanor changing. Zia sacrificed her bishop. A risky move. It exposed her queen but opened up a devastating attack. It was a move Khalid had only seen once before. Years ago. In a championship match in Las Vegas. A move that only one player in history had ever used successfully. The Sentinel's Gambit, Khalid whispered. Dorian's hand froze over the board. Khalid stood up slowly. Walked around the table. Looked Dorian directly in the eyes. Dorian Kross, Khalid said quietly. The man who threw away his career for $50,000. The man who betrayed the game of chess. The man who disappeared. The room went silent. Vivienne's eyes widened. She looked at Dorian, her janitor, her quiet code fixer, and suddenly everything made sense. Dorian stood, his face pale. Mr. Al-Zahrani, I can explain. Khalid held up a hand. No. I don't want explanations. I want to know one thing. Why did you do it? Why did you throw the match? Dorian looked at Zia. At his daughter. At the reason for everything. I did it for my wife, Dorian said, his voice breaking. She was dying. The treatment cost $50,000. I had no other way to get the money. So I made a choice. I could be a champion or I could be a husband. I chose her. I chose 3 more years with the woman I loved. And I'd make the same choice again. The room was silent. Khalid stared at him for a long moment. And then he smiled. You didn't betray chess, Mr. Kross. You honored it. Chess is about sacrifice. About seeing what matters most and protecting it, no matter the cost. You saw 15 moves ahead and realized the only winning move was to lose everything. He turned to Vivienne. Ms. Shaw, your company is worth saving. Not because of your code. Not because of your financials. But because you have people like this man in your building. People who understand what real sacrifice looks like. He pulled out his phone. I'm wiring $15 million into your account right now. I want 20% equity. And I want Mr. Dorian Kross on your strategic advisory board immediately. Vivienne couldn't breathe. $15 million? That's not enough to... That's just the first payment, Khalid said. I'm restructuring your entire debt. By the end of the month, AegisCore will be completely solvent. But only if Mr. Kross agrees to come out of hiding. Everyone looked at Dorian. The janitor. The disgraced grandmaster. The man who had spent 6 years invisible. Zia grabbed his hand. Say yes, Daddy. It's time to stop hiding. Dorian looked at his daughter. At Vivienne. At Khalid. And he nodded. Just, I'll do it. I need you to pause for just a second. Because what we just witnessed, a janitor becoming a strategic advisor, a disgraced grandmaster getting his redemption, this is only the middle of the story. If you're feeling this, if this is hitting you the way it's hitting me, please share this video with one person. Just one. Someone who needs to hear that comebacks are real. That love wins. That sacrifice matters. Because we're about to get to the romance, the betrayal, and the final, most satisfying checkmate you've ever seen. Let's keep going. Within 3 weeks, Dorian Cross went from pushing a mop to sitting in boardrooms. Khalid Al-Zahrani didn't just invest money, he invested belief. He paid off AegisCore's debt. He restructured the company. He brought in new clients from New York, Dubai, London. And he made it very clear, Dorian Cross was no longer a janitor. He was the strategic advisor. The man who could see patterns no one else could see. Dorian moved out of his tiny studio in Pilsen and into a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, Chicago. He bought Zia new clothes, enrolled her in a private school, gave her the childhood he'd always wanted her to have. But the most important change wasn't financial. It was Vivienne Shaw. She had always been kind to Dorian, even when he was just the janitor. But now, working side by side, she saw the full depth of his genius. His strategic mind. His moral courage. His fierce, protective love for his daughter. And Dorian saw Vivienne's fire. Her refusal to give up. Her dedication to protecting people. Her strength. They were perfect partners. But neither of them could admit they were falling in love. Dorian believed he didn't deserve happiness. He had loved once. Deeply, completely. And Anya had died. In his mind, love was a debt he'd already paid. Happiness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Every time Vivienne tried to get closer, a casual dinner invitation, a personal conversation, Dorian deflected. He kept everything professional. Distant. I owe you everything, Vivienne, he'd say. You gave me my life back. I can't risk. Risk what? Vivienne finally snapped one evening in the office. Risk being happy? Risk letting someone care about you? Dorian looked away. I already had my chance at love. It cost me everything. I can't do that again. Vivienne's frustration boiled over. So you're just going to hide forever? You spent 6 years hiding behind a mop. Now you're hiding behind gratitude. When are you going to stop running, Dorian? She walked out before he could answer. Dorian sat alone in the office, staring at the chessboard on his desk. And then Zia walked in. Zia Kross was 6 years old, but she saw patterns better than anyone. She sat down across from her father, her expression serious. Daddy, you're stuck. Dorian sighed. Zia, this isn't. You're playing like a rook, Zia interrupted. You only move in straight lines. Forward and backward. But you taught me that rooks can't win the game alone. You need the queen. Dorian stared at his daughter. Miss Vivienne is your queen, Daddy. But you keep pushing her away because you're scared. You think loving her means you're betraying Mommy. But that's not how love works. Dorian's eyes filled with tears. Zia, I loved your mother so much. I gave up everything for her. How can I? Mommy didn't buy you 3 years so you could be sad forever, Zia said gently. She bought you 3 years so I could be born. So you could be my daddy. So you could be happy again. You're not betraying her. You're honoring her. Dorian broke down. His 6-year-old daughter had just spoken the truth he'd been running from for years. Zia climbed into his lap and hugged him. It's okay to move diagonal, Daddy. Queens move diagonal. It's okay to be happy. The next evening, Dorian found Vivienne in her office. She was working late, as always. He stood in the doorway, his heart pounding. Vivienne. She looked up, surprised. Dorian. I thought you'd gone home. I need to tell you something, he said. And I need you to let me finish before you respond. Vivienne nodded, setting down her pen. Dorian stepped into the office. I've been a coward. I've been hiding, not behind a mop this time, but behind my grief. Behind my fear. I told myself I didn't deserve to be happy again. That loving you would be a betrayal of Anya. Vivienne's breath caught. But Zia reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Anya didn't sacrifice 3 years of treatment so I could spend the rest of my life alone. She did it so I could live. So I could be a father. So I could find love again. He stepped closer. Vivienne Shaw, you are the most courageous, brilliant, beautiful person I've ever met. You saved my life. You gave me my dignity back. And I'm terrified, absolutely terrified, of losing you the way I lost Anya. But I'm more terrified of never telling you the truth. He took a breath. I love you. And I'm done hiding from it. Vivienne stood up slowly. She walked around the desk until she was standing right in front of him. Dorian Cross, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I have been waiting for you to make this move for 6 months. I was starting to think I'd have to checkmate you myself. She smiled. I love you too. And I'm not going anywhere. Dorian pulled her into his arms and kissed her. From the doorway, Zia whispered triumphantly, pattern complete. Queens move diagonal. If you're crying right now, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Because we're about to get to the villain. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. For 6 months, life was perfect. Dorian and Vivienne were engaged. AegisCore was thriving. Zia was excelling in school, learning new languages, playing chess in local tournaments under a pseudonym. Dorian had everything he thought he'd lost forever: love, purpose, dignity. But in Palo Alto, California, a man named Caleb Vance was watching. And seething. Caleb had co-founded AegisCore with Vivienne 25 years ago. But when the company started struggling, he'd pushed for compromises, selling their tech to questionable buyers, cutting corners on ethics. Vivienne had refused. So Caleb left. And he'd spent the last 5 years watching from the sidelines as Vivienne struggled, failed, nearly lost everything. He'd been waiting for her to collapse. Waiting to swoop in and buy the company for pennies. But then Khalid Al-Zahrani invested. The debt disappeared. AegisCore went from dying to thriving. And the man responsible, the strategic advisor everyone was praising, was Dorian Cross. A disgraced, banned chess player. A cheater. Caleb couldn't stand it. She replaced me with a fraud, he muttered, scrolling through articles about AegisCore's turnaround. A man who threw a match for money. And everyone's treating him like a hero. Caleb made a decision. If Vivienne wouldn't let him back in, he'd burn the whole thing down. Caleb spent 2 weeks gathering every piece of documentation he could find about Dorian's past. The Las Vegas match. The investigation. The ban. The $50,000 payment. Vincent Calabrese's testimony. He compiled it all into a devastating dossier. And then he sent it anonymously to Michael Chin, a senior financial reporter at the Wall Street Journal. The subject line, AegisCore's $5 billion gamble on a convicted cheater. Michael Chin didn't publish immediately. He was a good journalist. He reached out to Dorian for comment. Dorian's phone rang on a Tuesday morning. He was in the office, reviewing code with Vivienne. Mr. Cross, this is Michael Chin from the Wall Street Journal. I'm calling about a story we're running tomorrow regarding your involvement with AegisCore Technologies. Specifically, your history of match fixing and your lifetime ban from competitive chess. Would you like to comment? Dorian's blood ran cold. How did you? We received documentation from an anonymous source. We've verified the facts. The story runs tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm giving you a chance to respond. Dorian hung up. Vivienne looked at him, alarmed. Dorian, what's wrong? He told her. Vivienne's face went pale. They're going to destroy us. Khalid invested $5 billion. If investors think we have a cheater advising us. I have to leave, Dorian said immediately. I have to resign. If I'm gone before the story runs, maybe? No. Vivienne's voice was steel. Absolutely not. You're not running again, Dorian. We fight this. Together. The story ran the next morning. Headline, AegisCore's controversial hire, chess grandmaster banned for match fixing now advises $5 billion company. The article was factual but devastating. It detailed Dorian's ban, the scandal, the $50,000 payment. It questioned Khalid's judgment. It raised doubts about AegisCore's leadership. The business world exploded. Social media lit up. Reddit threads dissected every detail. CNBC ran segments questioning whether Khalid Al-Zahrani had made the worst investment decision of his career. AegisCore stock, which had been soaring, dropped 18% in 2 hours. Investors started calling, demanding explanations, threatening to pull out. Dorian sat in Vivienne's office, his head in his hands. "I should have told you everything from the beginning. I should have." "You told me everything that mattered," Vivienne interrupted. "You told me about Anya, about the choice you made. I knew exactly who you were, Dorian. But the investors didn't. And now." The door burst open. Khalid Al-Zahrani walked in, his expression unreadable. Dorian stood. "Mr. Al-Zahrani, I'm prepared to resign immediately. I won't let my past—" "Sit down, Mr. Kross," Khalid said quietly. Dorian sat. Khalid walked to the window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. "I received 47 phone calls this morning. Investors, board members, reporters, all of them asking the same question. Did you know about Dorian Kross's past?" Silence. I told them yes. I knew. From the moment I watched him play chess with his daughter, I knew exactly who he was. Dorian looked up, shocked. Khalid turned to face him. "Mr. Kross, I didn't invest $5 billion in your resume. I invested in your character. The world sees a man who cheated. I see a man who sacrificed everything for the person he loved. Those are not the same thing." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling a press conference. Tomorrow. In New York. We're going to tell your story. The whole story. And we're going to let the world decide." Vivienne grabbed Dorian's hand. "We do this together." Dorian looked at her. At Khalid. At the future that was either going to redeem him or bury him forever. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's do it. This is the moment. The press conference that will either save everything or destroy it. If you've made it this far, drop a comment right now and tell me, do you think the world will forgive him? Let's go to New York." They had 24 hours to prepare. Khalid hired the best crisis management team in New York. They ran Dorian through mock interviews, hostile questions, worst-case scenarios. "Mr. Kross, you betrayed the trust of millions of chess fans. Why should anyone trust you now? Mr. Kross, you took money to throw a match. That's not sacrifice, that's fraud. Mr. Kross, how do we know you won't betray AegisCore the same way you betrayed chess?" Every question was designed to break him, to make him defensive, to make him look guilty. But Vivienne had a different strategy. "Don't defend yourself," she told him the night before the conference. "Tell the truth. Tell them about Anya. Tell them about the choice. Let them see your heart, Dorian. That's the only weapon we have." Dorian nodded, but his hands were shaking. Zia climbed into his lap. She'd been quiet all day, watching, listening. "Daddy, do you remember what you told me about endgames?" Dorian looked down at her. "What did I tell you?" "You said the endgame is when all the big pieces are gone. When it's just the king and a few pawns. And you said that's when you find out what kind of player you really are. Because you can't hide anymore. You can't rely on your queen or your rooks. You just have to be brave." Dorian's eyes filled with tears. "This is your endgame, Daddy. No more hiding. Just be brave." The press conference was held at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. The same hotel where Dorian had played in tournaments as a teenager. The same city where he'd proposed to Anya in Central Park. The ballroom was packed. Every major financial outlet. Tech reporters. Chess journalists who'd spent years vilifying him. Dorian sat at a table with Vivienne on his left and Khalid on his right. Zia sat in the front row, her eyes locked on her father. Catherine Walsh from the Wall Street Journal stood up first. "Mr. Kross, let's start with the obvious question. You accepted $50,000 to throw a championship match. You were banned for life. Why should anyone in this room believe you won't compromise AegisCore's ethics the same way you compromised chess?" The room went silent. Dorian took a breath. Ms. Walsh, you're right. I took $50,000 to lose a chess match. I was banned. I was disgraced. And I would do it again. Gasps rippled through the room. Because that $50,000 wasn't for me. It was for my wife, Anya. She had acute myeloid leukemia. Aggressive. The doctors said she had 6 months without treatment. There was an experimental trial in Houston. It cost $50,000 up front. I didn't have it. I tried everything, loans, grants, begging sponsors. No one would help. His voice cracked. So I made a choice. I could be a chess champion, or I could be a husband. I chose her. That $50,000 bought me 3 more years with the woman I loved. 3 years of mornings and laughter and life. 3 years that allowed my daughter, Zia, to be born. He looked at Zia. I didn't betray chess, Ms. Walsh. I honored the only thing that mattered more. And if you think that makes me untrustworthy, then I accept that. But I will never apologize for choosing my wife's life over my reputation. The room was silent. Another reporter stood. But Mr. Cross, you lied. You deceived people who trusted you. You're right, Dorian said. I did. And I've spent the last 6 years living with that shame. I became a janitor. I hid. I disappeared. Because I believed the world was right, that I was a cheater, a betrayer, someone who didn't deserve redemption. He looked at Vivienne. But then I met people who saw past the shame, who saw what I'd sacrificed and why. And they gave me a chance to prove that the worst thing I ever did doesn't define who I am. Vivienne leaned forward, her voice strong. I want to be very clear about something. I knew about Dorian's past before we hired him. Khalid knew. We made an informed decision to trust a man who sacrificed his career for love. And I would make that decision again. Khalid spoke next, his voice calm and powerful. I have invested $5 billion in companies all over the world. I have seen brilliant people make terrible decisions for greed, for ego, for power. But I have never seen someone sacrifice everything for love. That is the kind of character I invest in. Not resumes. Not titles. Character. Catherine Walsh stood again. Mr. Al-Zahrani, with all due respect, that's a beautiful sentiment. But investors want results, not poetry. How do you justify this risk? Khalid smiled. Ms. Walsh, in the 6 months since Dorian Cross joined AegisCore, we have closed $2.3 billion in new contracts. We have expanded into 12 new markets. Our client retention rate is 98%. Those are results. And they came from a man who understands what real sacrifice looks like. Another reporter, younger, stood up. Mr. Cross, I have a different question. Do you regret it? If you could go back, would you do it differently? Dorian looked at Zia. At Vivienne. At the life he'd built from the ashes. No, he said quietly. I wouldn't change a thing. Because that choice, as painful as it was, led me here. To my daughter. To a woman I love. To a second chance I never thought I'd get. The price was my reputation. But what I gained was a life worth living. The reporters were starting to pack up when a small voice called out from the front row. Excuse me. I have something to say. Everyone turned. Zia Kross stood up. Dorian's eyes went wide. Zia, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Daddy. She walked to the microphone, and someone adjusted it down to her height. Zia looked out at the room full of adults. Reporters. Investors. People who had the power to destroy her father. And she spoke. My name is Zia Kross. I'm 6 years old. And I want to tell you about my daddy. The room went completely silent. My daddy taught me to play chess. He taught me to speak 4 languages. He taught me to see patterns. But the most important thing he taught me is that people matter more than games. She looked directly at Catherine Walsh. My mommy died when I was 3. I don't remember her much. But my daddy tells me stories about her every night. About how she loved poetry. About how she laughed. About how brave she was when she was sick. And he tells me that the 3 years he got with her, the 3 years he bought with that $50,000, were the most important years of his life. Because that's when I was born. Her voice was steady, clear, heartbreaking. Everyone keeps asking if my daddy is a cheater. But I know the truth, my daddy isn't a cheater. He's a hero. Because he looked at his whole future, all the fame and money and championships, and he chose love. He chose my mommy. He chose me. Tears were streaming down faces around the room. The people who call him a cheater think chess is the most important thing. But my daddy taught me that people are always more important than games. And if choosing love makes you a cheater, then I hope everyone in this room is brave enough to cheat the same way. She stepped back from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause. Not professional applause. Standing ovation. From reporters. From investors. From people who had come to tear Dorian down. Catherine Walsh was wiping her eyes. Dorian walked over to Zia and picked her up, holding her tight. Khalid stood, his voice booming over the applause. I believe we have our answer. Character matters. Love matters. And Dorian Kross has more of both than anyone I've ever met. If you're not crying right now, check your pulse. That 6-year-old just saved her father with the truth. If this story is wrecking you in the best way, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now let's talk about what happened next. The press conference went viral. Not in hours. In minutes. Video clips of Zia's speech flooded TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Hashtag Zia Kross was trending worldwide within 2 hours. Hashtag Love Over Glory hit #1 on Twitter by that evening. The story wasn't about a disgraced chess player anymore. It was about a father who sacrificed everything for his daughter. It was about a 6-year-old girl defending her hero. It was about love defeating shame. Major outlets picked it up. Good Morning America. The Today Show. CNN. Fox Business. Everyone wanted to interview Dorian. Everyone wanted to hear Zia speak again. But more importantly, the investors stopped panicking. AegisCore's stock didn't just recover, it surged. Up 34% in 3 days. Because the story had reframed everything. This wasn't a company that had hired a cheater. This was a company that had given a second chance to a man who understood sacrifice. Khalid received calls from investors who wanted in. New clients who wanted AegisCore's protection. Universities who wanted to study Dorian's strategic mind. Within a week, AegisCore announced a new $10 billion valuation. Dorian Kross, the janitor from Chicago, was now a strategic advisor to one of the most successful cybersecurity companies in America. But the most important vindication came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after the press conference, a letter arrived at AegisCore's headquarters in Chicago. It was addressed to Dorian Kross. The return address: International Chess Federation. Headquarters in Lausanne, Switzerland. Dorian opened it with shaking hands. Vivienne stood beside him. Zia climbed onto his lap. He read aloud, "Dear Mr. Kross, the International Chess Federation has reviewed your case in light of recent public testimony and documentary evidence regarding the circumstances of your 2019 match forfeiture. While we do not condone match fixing under any circumstances, we acknowledge that your actions were driven by extraordinary personal circumstances. Your decision to forfeit your career to save your wife's life demonstrates a character that, while flawed in execution, was rooted in profound love and desperation. After careful deliberation, the ICF board has voted to lift your lifetime ban, effective immediately. Your titles are hereby restored. Your record is amended to reflect the full context of your actions. You are welcome to return to competitive chess at any time. We also wish to extend a formal apology for the pain our initial ruling caused you and your family. The game of chess is built on strategy, sacrifice, and difficult choices. You exemplified all three. Respectfully, the International Chess Federation." Dorian's hands were shaking so badly he dropped the letter. Vivienne picked it up, tears streaming down her face. "Dorian, They restored your titles. You're officially a grandmaster again. Dorian couldn't speak. He just held Zia and cried. I'm proud of you, Daddy, Zia whispered. You won the endgame. 1 month later, as AegisCore was preparing to go public with a massive IPO, Dorian received an unexpected visitor. He was in his office, his real office, with his name on the door, when security called. Mr. Kross, there's a man here to see you. Says his name is Caleb Vance. Dorian froze. Vivienne, who was reviewing documents across the room, looked up sharply. Tell security to escort him out. Wait, Dorian said quietly. Let him come up. Dorian, he tried to destroy us. I know, but I want to hear what he has to say. 5 minutes later, Caleb Vance walked into Dorian's office. He looked terrible. Hollow. Ashamed. I'm not here to cause trouble, Caleb said immediately, his voice hoarse. I'm here to apologize. Vivienne crossed her arms. You leaked Dorian's past to the press. You tried to destroy this company. Why should we listen to anything you have to say? Caleb looked at the floor. Because you were right. And I was wrong. About everything. He looked up at Dorian. I watched your press conference. I watched your daughter defend you. And I realized something. I spent 25 years building companies, chasing money, fighting for success. And I have nothing. No family. No love. Nothing that matters. His voice cracked. You lost everything and gained everything that matters. I have everything and it means nothing. I was so angry watching you succeed, watching Vivienne choose you over me, that I tried to destroy you. But all I did was prove that I'm the one who's been cheating all along. Not at games. At life. He took a shaky breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right. Love matters more than glory. And I was too blind to see it. Silence filled the office. Dorian studied Caleb. Saw the desperation. The regret. The same brokenness he'd felt 6 years ago when he'd lost everything. He saw the pattern. Vivienne, Dorian said quietly. Can you give us a minute? Vivienne looked at him, surprised. But she nodded and left. When they were alone, Dorian gestured to a chair. Sit. Caleb sat, confused. Dorian leaned back. You tried to destroy me, Caleb. You almost succeeded. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It's the only place you can build from. I know because I've been there. Caleb looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. AegisCore is going public in 2 months. We're expanding. We need developers, strategists, people who understand the cybersecurity landscape. We especially need people who've made mistakes and learned from them. Dorian slid a folder across the desk. This is a job offer. Junior developer. Low pay. Long hours. You'd report directly to our lead engineer. And if you screw up even once, you're gone. Caleb stared at the folder, his hands shaking. Why? He whispered. Why would you help me after what I did? Dorian's voice was gentle. Because someone gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. And because Zia taught me that everyone deserves the opportunity to rebuild. But you have to actually do the work, Caleb. No shortcuts. No entitlement. Just honest work. Caleb grabbed the folder, tears streaming down his face. I won't let you down. I swear. Don't swear to me, Dorian said. Prove it. That moment right there, when Dorian offered redemption to the man who tried to destroy him. If that doesn't make you believe in second chances, I don't know what will. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We're almost to the end. 3 months after the press conference, Vivienne and Dorian stood in the same conference room where Zia had first spoken Arabic to Khalid Al-Zahrani. But the room looked completely different now. Soft golden light. White roses and deep red peonies. Chairs arranged in intimate rows. The marble chessboard still on the table, but now surrounded by candles. It was small. 50 people. The AegisCore team who'd stayed through the crisis. Khalid Al-Zahrani. Dorian's old mentor, Grandmaster Richard Bellamy, who'd flown in from Boston to reconcile. And Zia, of course, wearing a beautiful blue dress and holding the rings. Vivienne wore a simple white gown. Elegant. Understated. Perfect. Dorian wore a dark suit. His hands were shaking. The officiant, a friend of Khalid's, began the ceremony. But before the vows, Dorian asked to speak. Vivienne, I spent 6 years hiding. Hiding from my past. Hiding from shame. Hiding from the possibility of love. I told myself I didn't deserve happiness. That I'd already had my chance and I'd wasted it. His voice shook. But you taught me something I'd forgotten. Sacrifice isn't about losing. It's about choosing what matters most. I sacrificed my career for Anya. And she sacrificed her life to give me Zia. And now I'm standing here, about to marry the most incredible woman I've ever met, because both of them taught me that love is always worth the cost. He took her hands. I promise to never hide again. To never run. To choose you, every single day, the way I chose Anya. To honor her memory by living the life she bought for me. With you. Forever. Vivienne was crying. Happy tears. Zia Kross, you are the bravest man I've ever met. You taught me that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's about fighting for what you believe in, even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. She smiled through her tears. I promise to stand with you. To fight beside you. To be your partner in every possible way. I choose you. Today. Tomorrow. Always. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may. Finally. Zia shouted from the front row. You may kiss now. Pattern complete. The room erupted in laughter and applause. Dorian kissed Vivienne. And the janitor who'd lost everything finally had everything that mattered. At the reception, Khalid Al-Zahrani stood to give a toast. I came to Chicago 18 months ago to evaluate a business investment. I was prepared to test a CEO. To see if she had the character to lead a company through crisis. He smiled at Vivienne. What I found instead was a family. A CEO who refused to give up. A janitor who was secretly a genius. And a 6-year-old girl who spoke truth to power in a way that changed everything. He raised his glass. I've invested in hundreds of companies around the world. Tech startups in Silicon Valley. Real estate in Dubai. Energy in Texas. But the best investment I ever made was betting on 3 people who taught me the most important lesson in business and in life. In the end game, when the money is gone and the titles are meaningless, only one thing matters. The pattern of your character. He looked at Dorian. Dorian, you made a choice that cost you everything. And you never apologized for it. Not because you were proud, but because you knew in your heart it was right. That is the kind of man I want advising me. That is the kind of man I want building the future. He looked at the room. To Dorian and Vivienne, may your marriage be as strong as your courage. And may your love always defeat your fear. To Dorian and Vivienne, the room echoed. As the evening wound down, Zia climbed onto the stage where the band had been playing. She grabbed the microphone, her 6-year-old voice filling the room. Excuse me. I have something important to say. Everyone turned. Zia looked at her father. At Vivienne. At the roomful of people who'd become her family. My daddy taught me that chess is like life. Every piece matters. Even pawns. And the most important rule is this. The game isn't over until someone says checkmate. She smiled. A long time ago, my daddy thought his game was over. He thought he lost. But he didn't lose. He just made a sacrifice that nobody understood. And then he kept playing. Her voice got stronger. Miss Vivienne thought her game was over when she had $3 billion in debt. But she kept playing. Mr. Khalid tested everyone because he wanted to see who would keep playing even when it was hard. She looked directly at the camera that was recording the wedding. So here's what I want everyone watching to know. Life is going to test you. You're going to face impossible choices. You're going to lose pieces you love. You're going to feel like the game is over. She paused. But it's not over until you give up. And if you keep playing, if you keep choosing love, keep telling the truth, keep being brave, then you get to the end game. And in the end game, the smallest pieces become queens. She held up the chess piece she'd been carrying in her pocket all day. A white pawn. My daddy was a pawn hiding in the shadows. And now he's a king. Miss Vivienne was about to lose everything. And now she's a queen. I was just a little girl in the corner. And now I get to tell you the most important truth I know. Her eyes were shining. Love always wins. Truth always matters. And the smallest voice in the room can change everything. She set the microphone down. The room exploded in applause. Dorian was crying. Vivienne was crying. Khalid was standing, clapping harder than anyone. And Zia, 6 years old, walked off the stage like she'd just delivered the closing argument in the trial of the century. Because she had. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love wins, that courage matters, that redemption is real, then do me one favor. Share this video. Send it to someone who's struggling. Someone who thinks their story is over. Someone who needs to hear that second chances exist. And leave a comment telling me which part hit you hardest. Was it Zia's speech? The press conference? The moment Dorian chose love over glory? Because stories like this don't go viral by accident. They go viral because people like you believe they matter. Now let me tell you what happened after the wedding. 6 months after the wedding, AegisCore Technologies went public. The IPO was held on the New York Stock Exchange. Vivienne rang the opening bell with Dorian by her side and Zia holding both their hands. The company opened at $87 per share. By the end of the day, it closed at $142. AegisCore was now worth $18 billion. The employees who'd stayed through the crisis, the developers who'd worked without pay, the support staff who'd believed in Vivienne's vision, became millionaires overnight. Dorian, who owned 8% of the company, was suddenly worth over $1 billion. But he didn't buy a mansion in the Hamptons. He didn't buy a yacht or a private jet. He bought a modest house in Evanston, Illinois, just outside Chicago, with a backyard for Zia, and a study where he could teach her chess. He donated $100 million to cancer research. In Anya's name, he established a scholarship fund for kids who'd lost parents to illness. $50 million, covering tuition, housing, everything. And he kept working. Not because he needed the money, but because he believed in what AegisCore was protecting. 1 year after the IPO, Dorian received an invitation. The World Chess Championship, held in New York City, Madison Square Garden. The International Chess Federation wanted him to play an exhibition match against the current world champion, Magnus Carlsen. Not for a title, just for honor. Dorian almost said no. But Zia found the invitation and brought it to him, her eyes wide. Daddy, you have to do this. You have to show everyone that the Sentinel is back. Vivienne agreed. You've been hiding from chess for years, Dorian. Not because you were ashamed anymore, but because you were scared. It's time to stop being scared. So Dorian accepted. The match was broadcast live. Millions watching. The man who'd thrown away his career facing the best player in the world. The game lasted 4 hours. Magnus played brilliantly, aggressively, testing Dorian at every move. But Dorian played like the Sentinel, seeing patterns 15 moves ahead, sacrificing pieces that looked critical but weren't, building toward an endgame that only he could see. In the final sequence, Dorian made the move that had defined his life. He sacrificed his queen. It looked reckless. Commentators gasped. But 3 moves later, Dorian said quietly, "Checkmate." Magnus stared at the board, then smiled, and extended his hand. "The Sentinel never left," Magnus said. "Welcome back, Grandmaster Kross." The crowd at Madison Square Garden stood and roared. Dorian looked into the audience, found Vivienne and Zia. They were crying and cheering and holding each other. He'd won. Not because he'd beaten Magnus Carlsen, but because he'd beaten the shame. He'd beaten the fear. He'd finally, truly, completely forgiven himself. 5 years after that match, Dorian and Vivienne sat on their porch in Evanston, watching 11-year-old Zia play chess with kids from the neighborhood. She was teaching them, patiently, kindly, the way her father had taught her. Vivienne leaned against Dorian's shoulder. "She's going to be better than you, you know." Dorian smiled. "She already is. Are you okay with that?" "Vivienne, the best thing I ever did, better than any chess game I ever played, was choosing Anya. Choosing love. Because that choice gave me Zia. And Zia gave me you. And you gave me a life I never thought I deserved." He kissed her forehead. "I don't need to be the best chess player anymore. I just need to be the best father. The best husband. The best version of myself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter laugh and teach and shine. "Do you ever regret it?" Vivienne asked softly. "The choice you made?" Dorian thought for a long moment. "No. Because every single thing that matters to me, Zia, you, this life, exists because I chose love over glory. And I'd make that choice again. Every single time." Zia looked up from the chessboard and waved at them. Dorian waved back. And in that moment, he realized something profound. The endgame isn't about winning. It's about playing for what matters. And he'd played the perfect game. So that's the story of Dorian Kross. The sentinel. The janitor. The grandmaster. The father. The husband. The man who lost everything and gained everything that matters. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Life is going to give you impossible choices. Choices where there's no good option. Where every path looks like failure. But the choices you make in those moments define who you are. Not your titles. Not your money. Not your reputation. Your character. Dorian chose love when the world told him to choose glory. And that choice cost him 6 years of shame, 6 years of hiding, 6 years of believing he was worthless. But it also gave him 3 more years with Anya. It gave him Zia. It gave him Vivienne. It gave him a life of meaning. The world will judge you for your choices. People will call you a failure, a cheater. But the only opinion that matters is the one you see in the mirror. And the only question that matters is this. Did you choose what was right or what was easy? Dorian chose right. And it broke him. And then it remade him into something stronger than he ever was before. So if you're facing an impossible choice right now, if you're drowning in debt, or shame, or fear, remember this story. Remember that the smallest voice can change everything. Remember that sacrifice isn't weakness. It's the ultimate form of love. Remember that the game isn't over until you give up. And remember that love always, always wins. If this story changed something in you, I need you to do 3 things. 1. Subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this every single week. Stories about courage, redemption, and people who refuse to give up. 2. Share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Your friend who's struggling. Your family member who thinks their story is over. The person who needs to be reminded that second chances are real. 3. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Tell me about a time you chose love over glory. Or tell me which part of Dorian's story hit you hardest. Because here's the truth, you're not just watching a story. You're part of a community of people who believe that courage still matters. That love still wins. That the smallest person in the room can change everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And remember, in the endgame of life, the only pattern that truly matters is the one written on your heart. Until next time.